Welcome back, guests. Hello, Geoff.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. And for those at home, you haven't seen us re-record this opening several times, so we're a little punchy already. Um, Geoff, yesterday was Reconciliation Day. Um, you were you were reading up
Yeah, I
on
didn't
a
I
few
didn't make it
topics.
out to an event, but I was certainly read a lot of the debates that are out there. They're brand new debates. I mean, I would say that the good news is we're talking about reconciliation in a national way that we never did before. The day was declared, and the Truth and Reconciliation Report came down 10 years ago. But there are a lot of debates too about what constitutes residential school denialism, and so a lot of really interesting reading and a lot of big issues ahead for the province of BC in particular. So that was
Yeah,
my
for
day.
sure. Yeah, for
Mm,
sure. And I encourage for those who haven't had a chance to listen to our interview with Wamish Hamilton, CBC Indigenous Affairs reporter, which we did in August. Check that out. He had a great perspective on bridging the understanding between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. So,
A
um,
great piece.
yeah. Well, I was out in the wilderness the last few days, Geoff, way out on the west coast of Vancouver Island, on a remote trail amongst all the bears and cougars and other wolves. And I turn a corner and I run into two former staffers in the BC legislature. So, you just, BC, you can never leave,
No,
like they're everywhere. They're everywhere. So I don't know if you encounter that when you're out on a remote inlet in your sailboat and run into random legislative staffers out in the wilderness, but
not too often, but I do bump into people in downtown Vancouver surprisingly often who I've run into various places in politics. So yeah, you can never leave is a true comment, certainly valid for Hotel Pacifico. To wit, our current guest, our new guest today. Not our new guest, our back for another visit with us.
back for return engagement, Fran Yanor. Fran, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And for those who don't know Fran, she's the uh, the brains behind the Northern Beat publication. Fran, it continues to grow. You continue to extend your reach throughout the province with all your great writings.
Thank you, Mike.
Fran, what are the
This is your
stories
chance
that,
for a plug here, Fran. Tell us what you're
Sorry.
up to.
yeah,
I'm, I'm notoriously bad at it. Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, we could jump into UBCM. Or did you want me to talk about?
Well, why not? Let's go for it.
Sorry.
Well,
yeah,
as I get your Northern Beat newsletter, and you wrote a lot about
as do
UBCM last
I.
week. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
very
you were there, I
worthwhile.
was there, Geoff was on the couch all week. We're going to break it down this week in terms of what happened with David Eby's speech, John Rustad's speech, which had a feathery surprise to it in the introduction. The introductory speech of Emily Lowen, the Green Party leader, Oligarchs Beware, and even Dallas Brody spoke. So there was a lot going on from the podium, but there was a lot going on in the hallways and the corridors and the street corners and the in the pubs and the bars. What did you pick up on the street, Fran? What were you hearing?
Well, I talk to a lot of mayors and councillors, and I always do because that's sort of they're a big part of what we our sources and who we talk to generally. But I have never seen the energy and the effectiveness of mayors as they were this time. They really
Mm,
galvanized, like they were quite organized. You know, the Okanagan mayors had a bunch of an op-ed that came out beforehand. They had press conferences, and then they had that like powerful gathering on the lawn on Wednesday. So halfway through the conference, there was 48 that I counted, probably more because they were milling about, and people didn't even know about it. It was almost somewhat
This is this the
spontaneous.
on the steps of the legislature for the Save Our Streets
Yes,
event you're referring to
that's
that
right.
Jess
Organized.
Ketchum organized. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think six mayors and the now president of UBCM spoke
Yeah.
very impassioned speeches, all of them, all because they're just all about street disorder. Really, what their two primary concerns are: they want bail reform for repeat offenders, and they want mandatory care for the people who are most in distress on the streets with addictions and mental health and brain injury. And they've hit the wall. Like I remember them coming in 2022, and they approached. They kind of hit the wall then with David Eby when he was Attorney General, and they said, "We can't handle this anymore. You got to do something about it." But 3 years later, it seems like they had a response from the Premier.
They did in the speech, yeah. So the mayors that were speaking up on the steps, I mean, there was Tom Dyers from Kelowna, and I'm trying to remember who else was there, but
there was John Henderson from Seychelles.
That's right.
Nice little speech. There was, of course, Brad West from Coquitlam and Leonard Krogh.
Brad travels around with a microphone, so it's not natural for him to be there.
Yeah, but he did well. He had the crowd going, and so did Leonard Krogh.
Yeah, Leonard Krogh, yeah.
Who is both very articulate. Krogh has been talking about this for a long time. Like he said, I started talking about mandatory care, and he said, I can't remember, 2018 or 2019. And back then he got, lambasted for it. And now it's a reality, I think, that most people on all sides of the situation, I think, have come around to accepting.
Well, there were a number of conservative MLAs in the press conference too, and an independent MLA by the name of Sturko was there, which was convenient for her because I think she's been basically camped out on the legislature lawn since Monday, since she got thrown out of her office.
But in fairness to her, in her defense, she has led the charge on public safety and safe supply and public street disorder, and she is an ex-RCMP officer, so her heart is
it's her
in
issue.
this. Yeah, it's her issue, right?
But I think I would certainly agree with Leonard Krogh on this point, though, Fran, that I remember pre-pandemic that some mayors, including him and the then mayor of Kelowna and a few others, were starting to identify that the people that they were encountering in the streets were often brain damaged, had permanent loss of various functions due to fentanyl use, and were repeat offenders and incorrigible in a lot of ways. There just hadn't been a policy response. And the Premier did announce a number of beds. I'm not sure if beds is the right unit for Surrey and Prince George, and got some applause for that. But what specifically is missing in their minds from a policy standpoint? Is it legislation? Is it more staff? Was there a specific ask the mayors made, or did they just condemn the province's inaction or lack of success up till now?
Oh, no. They were very specific. That's the thing that really is really impressive, is they're very organized and had data. And so what they're specifically asking for is bail reform, because these, the so-called revolving door, where someone gets pulled in, they get arrested, police have to, under federal criminal code, they have to release them within 24 hours unless they have a reason to keep them. And then they can't charge in BC, one of 3 jurisdictions in Canada that the police can't charge. So they have to gather the evidence, and then it's the Attorney General, the Crown that charges. So there's this big gap. People see someone commit a crime, then immediately they're back on the street, and then they don't even get charged, if at all. It can be months or a year, So the mayors are saying, no, we need to change this. You need to, when they get arrested, they need to stay in jail. And then, they didn't go specifically. They're not going to write the law. They're just saying there needs to be consequences. There's no consequences. Like Leonard Krogh said at one point in a public safety panel at UBCM, he said, look, there's a guy in, I forget where, Penticton. And, if someone's been caught shoplifting 60 times, they need to go to jail, he said, and they need to get some help. They need to go somewhere where they get some help. They can't just leave them on the street. That's not acceptable anymore.
Yes, many of us have become used to scanning the shelves at our local grocery store, looking for those Made in Canada labels. But what does Made in Canada look like when it comes to AI? Last week, presenting sponsor TELUS made history by opening Canada's first fully sovereign AI factory in Rimouski, Quebec. This factory is putting Canada at the forefront of innovation. The facility is powered by NVIDIA's latest generation graphic processing units with industry-leading computing infrastructure from HPE. And if that's not impressive enough, the factory is certified to LEED Gold standards, is powered by over 99% renewable energy sources, and uses 75% less water than the average AI plant. All this means that for the first time, Canadian businesses, banks, healthcare facilities, and other data-driven organizations will no longer have to rely on foreign-controlled systems to develop AI solutions. Instead, TELUS is delivering sovereign computing power that is built, owned, and operated by Canadians so that Canadian data stays within our borders. Truly a made in Canada approach. We'll be talking more about TELUS's commitments to digital innovation and diving deeper into what sovereign really means next week.
So when they say involuntary care beds, I mean, the Premier is clearly supporting that. He made that crystal clear. I was going to go back, but ran out of time to check what kind of commitments the government's made beyond just adding beds. Is there going to be a legislative fix or attempt to change the rules, or are we going to continue with the current rules but sort of interpret it in a different way, which was, I think, what Daniel Vigo, the special advisor, was proposing? I just don't know what success looks like in the minds of the mayors, because the new facilities will obviously take a year or two before they have an impact.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. That's a good assessment in terms of they're not expecting to do any legislation that I know of. What Vigo said to the mayors, he said a couple of surprising things. He's a pretty dense speaker, so you have to parse through what he's saying. He's a very smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he said one of the problems with mandatory care is that the province has been applying it incorrectly and often. So he's saying what the province has been doing is just the province as in the system. Police will bring the person in, the healthcare professional will assess them and release them in the street. And he said that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to bring them in, assess them, then come up with a plan, a path forward. Do they need to stay in the hospital in acute care? Do they need to stay longer? Where do they need to go? And he's just saying that is how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have a care plan for this person. You don't just boot them back out onto the street. But the problem is, as I'm sure you and everyone else knows, is there's no continuum of care. There's no system to put the people in. So I would say the healthcare professionals were doing the best they could because there's nowhere to send someone. You go, okay, this person obviously needs treatment, but where is that going to happen? There is none.
So those two new facilities that you're referring to, Geoff, that were announced by the Premier, those I think are going, if I heard correctly, Surrey and Prince George?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know too much about the Surrey aspect, and they already have they announced in the spring 10 spaces in Surrey pretrial and 10 spaces in Alouette Correctional. So those are in 2 correctional centers, which is a good place to start for people. If you're no one wants to put them in jail if they need treatment, but some people need both, right? They need to.
Right.
Well, they're in jail. They're already there. So the involuntary aspect was resolved by the criminal system. I think the other challenge for the government, which has not been discussed very much, is that a lot of people are going into involuntary care because of mental health issues as it is. Some reports have said even more than in other provinces. There's a significant number. And yet there's also a lot of resistance to committing people, which is the term we used to use, if there's a skepticism on the part of the physician or the judge even, that there's space for them to go be treated. So, Vigo's analysis is interesting because I think there is going to be required a big culture change to convince physicians that if they commit somebody or psychiatrists, that there's going to be a program for them to be treated in.
Well, he literally said, there's among my peers, he said, there has been this negative connotation attached to mandatory care, and in fact, he said it's a tool that sometimes is required, and it's exceptionally effective. So what I do know, I don't know much about these there's 100 beds that the Premier announced for between Surrey and Prince George, and I do know a lot about the Prince George facility, not so much about Surrey. So there is a youth correctional center up in Prince George, and there's a psychiatrist up there that has been leading the charge. Started right about the same time as Vigo started, and she said, hey, we got this correctional center up here. It's pretty much empty. Perfect for a mental health psychiatric facility is what she called it, because she said, Sorry, I don't mean to hydrophone you here, but with the closure of Riverview, the province's only mental health facility ended up winding up in the 2000s. But I mean, really, it was part of the deinstitutionalization that the whole globe went through. With the loss of that mental hospital, this psychiatrist said, I've come to realize that without a mental hospital in the province, the whole foundation crumbles. That. And she says, you look on the street, you can see it. That is because we don't have a mental health. She said, we have people, we admit them into the hospital, and then we have no place to put them. Or there's so many people, they're on our psych ward, and then other people come in and they can't use the psych ward. She said they had people on their surgical ward waiting to put in the psych ward, which is not very optimal for anyone when they're violent, for instance, Yeah. So this youth facility is 60-bed capacity. And according to my sources in health, this is being considered as a place where it should be able to handle everyone. So right from the ER visit, instead of police having to bring a person into ER to stabilize, and then the doctors have to stabilize them there, and none of them are addictions experts, they could potentially bring them into this new facility. And then it takes so much pressure off the hospitals. And this psychiatrist, Dr. Barbara Kane, who's been with the practicing up there for 40 years, and she's the head of mental health for Northern Health. She said, and I probably misrepresented her title on that one, but anyway, she said this will take the pressure off the other two hospitals in the north that have psych wards, which is Terrace and Dawson Creek, because what they can now do is potentially then send them down to Prince George. And the thing that we've known for a long time is there's not a lot of prolific offenders when you look at the grand scheme of things. The people that are committing the most crimes, there's not. When I talked to EB into 2022, there was less than 500 they estimated for the province.
Province-wide.
Yeah. So that could be why he's apparently asked Vigo to come up with 400 involuntary care beds. And they want them in pre-existing facilities, Geoff, as you mentioned, so that they can get them up and running quicker. So I think this Prince George facility could get up and running. And if they do operate it as envisioned, it would be like a mini mental health facility, which I'm sure they won't call it that because they want to not call it that. But
just a bit of a segue on this. I'll ask you, Geoff, is this appointment of Larry Campbell as the czar of the downtown east side. What do you make of that?
Well,
you worked with Larry Campbell back in the day, right? In the mayor's office.
I want to circle back to this at the end of the show a bit, but I think it's a potentially difficult piece for the government, and not because of any of Larry's qualities. I think of all the people who could look at the problems of the downtown east side, Larry Campbell is a former coroner, former police officer, former mayor. And then as a senator, he did a lot of work in drug reform and that kind of thing. He's well qualified and has quite a bit of experience. But he's got 6 months to make recommendations on one of the most intractable problems in BC politics. And Daniel Vigo, likewise, very smart guy, as Fran says, has made a series of recommendations, which we're seeing roll out now with some beds in secure facilities already, which is good. But it's hard for me to see this program moving the needle very quickly in terms of a change in the climate on the streets, at least in the near term. And I'm very interested to see if that pans out. I mean, I think Larry's got two challenges, which Vigo had too, but Vigo's were less in some respects. The downtown east side and the drug issue province-wide is a cross-ministry problem that does involve bail reform, which is federal, so it's cross-jurisdictional, and it's cross-ministry. So if Larry wants to have a meeting with all the people who may touch the issue on the downtown east side even narrowly, it involves housing, it involves health, it involves Solicitor General, their income assistance is part of it. All of those players kind of need to understand what the program is before they're going to get ahead. But I just want to stop briefly on Premier Eby's speech, because Fran's indicated how energetic it was. I don't know how you felt, Mike, but I hated going to UBCMs as a senior political staffer because it's kind of like the spring break. Maybe that's the wrong simile, but of BC politics. It's like all the players get together in the room, and the so-called top player has to perform for all the rest. And it's easy to fail. But I thought EB's reception, in spite of all of you that you've said, Fran, which I agree with about how ready they were for this debate, was pretty good. And he got a standing ovation, and he seemed to win the crowd over. And it would have been quite easy for something worse to happen. So it was my perception on track, or did you think he was getting more hostile a reception than he might have wanted?
Well, I'll go first. Give Fran a chance to nuance her response. Um, I thought he did have a warm ovation, actually, at the end of the speech. I would say this in previous UBCMs that Premier Eby's brought a good tone to his remarks. Um, he can be an engaging speaker in terms of connecting with the audience, and I think generally did a pretty good job of that at UBCM because he keynoted, I don't know, for 20, 25, 30 minutes, and then he did the Q&A, which is, I think
That's his happy place.
is to his
Yeah.
credit that he does the Q&A, but I think it's to his credit that he does, do a speech as well. I think in the past, sometimes he's gone straight into a Q&A, and you kind of I think it's important to set the table with like, here are the important things I want to say, and then let's go talk about them. Um, but I think one thing that I think they were trying to do, I think there was part of it was a charm offensive to take the temperature down on the Heritage Conservation Act, which we can get into in a few minutes, maybe. There's a bit of a cleanup on aisle 9 dynamic going on with that issue that had been bubbling since Monday. And by the time it got to Friday, there was like, let's bring out the mops. And the premier brought out the mops and kind of tried to clean up a bit of a problem that was brewing by extending the consultation, because that was a pretty persistent theme throughout the week from mayors. But in terms of the proactive agenda, one of the things I perked up on was they are trying to they are undergoing a pivot on natural resources, and they are trying to make that their thing now, and mining and energy in particular, and trying almost like they're trying to sell their own base that this is the right thing to do because we can do it with the right standards, but we also need it to support people. Like we need it to pay for things because they're broke, and so the major projects, he had a bit of U.S. rhetoric in there, like, elbows up and all that stuff as a rationale for it. But I can see that there's a strategy behind it that they're trying to move the party from one space where it was 2 or 3 years ago when EB first became premier, and maybe they're moving him with it over here, which is like more of a moderate message that's a little more accessible to the center of the spectrum, I would argue. What's the deal with cold plunges? They're pretty popular right now. I don't get it. They're trendy, invigorating, and apparently they build resilience. Who knew that taking cold showers to save money on heating would turn into a wellness craze? Luckily, for me, saving energy doesn't mean giving up hot showers. Across BC, thousands of people made their homes and businesses more efficient last year, and it was all possible thanks to our sponsor, FortisBC. And the impact? Pretty impressive. In 2024 alone, with the help of rebates, FortisBC customers managed to cut their gas and electricity use enough to lower emissions by almost 1 million tons. How did that happen? Through insulation upgrades, energy-efficient heating and cooling systems, and money-saving rebates. Even local producers got in on it. Canoe Forest Products in Salmon Arm is just one example. They manufacture plywood, a key material for retrofits and new builds, and are slashing energy use while boosting business. So go ahead and leave the cold plunges to the spas. Check out the rebates at fortisbc.com/rebates. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
How did it feel, Fran? Did he do okay?
I think he did. I think it was lukewarm at first. People are, I would say there's a high level of dissatisfaction with the government, but there's also a high level of desperation, and so they really want a solution. So it's different than, like you said, do they just sort of say what was wrong? Not at all. Like, the thing that really struck me too is like how many provincial responsibilities have been downloaded onto municipalities, and it's almost without fail. And it's across, it's housing, it's healthcare, and public disorder, and all that kind of stuff too. But it's like a significant amount of money. And the housing also, I heard a fair amount about that, is the implementation, having to implement legislation without the resources, the infrastructure. So in terms of the audience reaction, I think it was warmer by the end than it was at the beginning. And I think you're right. It was a charm offensive. There's lots of, I can only imagine, expensive jokes in there, but there was a few funny ones.
Worth every penny.
I think Gavin Dew yelled out, "How much did that one cost?" But anyway, it is necessary. You have to communicate with your public. So
He did commit to bringing cabinet up to Fort St. John. That was one thing he did.
That was part of the charm of it.
That was a little throwaway to say, I met with Fort St. John. I'm going to bring the cabinet up there. It's like,
well, especially since he was gone the whole week. Like until he may have started meeting with people before Thursday night, but that's my first awareness of him.
He was in New York, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
so
I was wondering how that went over.
That did not go over well with the mayors that were aware of it. Where it's like, where is this guy? And then he's talking about critical mineral. It didn't sound, it wasn't like some sort of pressing thing that took him away. I think there was some concern, but I also think that the bottom line is they just want solutions. And so if he actually just starts working with them and listening with them, I think they're too overwhelmed right now to do anything other than just say thank you and take whatever they can and build on it.
And there was a Gaza protester who interrupted his speech probably about 5 minutes in, pretty aggressively. And
just one guy though.
Well, one guy yelling, like he was yelling, like
yeah,
it wasn't like a heckle. Like he stood up, yelled, and wasn't going to leave until he was ready. And the crowd kind of turned on him, just said, "Be quiet, sit down." But he eventually was escorted to the exit. He made his point, but it does remind one of it's not that hard to get into these events.
Well, they actually had tighter security than I was familiar with in previous times. I talked to the security guard who escorted him out.
How about some of the other leaders? We shouldn't let we get John Rustad fresh from his leadership review.
Ooh,
yeah, Rustad, it's kind of interesting what he didn't say as well as what he said. But the one thing that I was surprised at the outset of his remarks was he made a joke, for starters. He made a joke about the jokes, right? The joke about the cost of EB's jokes. And then he went in to talk about the ostriches and the ostrich cull, which, is becoming an issue that's fraught with obviously a lot of really weird politics up in Edgewood in the Okanagan, I think it is. But I don't know where Edgewood is, actually. I can admit that. I think it's somewhere near Kingfisher. It's in the Kingfisher metropolitan area. Wherever the hell Edgewood is, there's a lot of ostriches there. Anyways, people are freaking out about these ostriches, but Rustad leads his speech with the ostriches.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was actually setting up a joke about EB having his head in the ground or whatever. Is that what ostriches do? They stick their head in the ground, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was thinking like, okay, here's a joke about ostriches. But no, it wasn't a joke. He started talking about ostriches. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's what we're leading with,
Yeah.
And I just thought it's a fringe issue, frankly. I know that some people are really worked up about it, but I just thought that was an interesting choice.
I heard two interesting things related to the ostrich that I had no idea. Well, first was a mayor, since I had missed Rusted's speech. I did read it after and hear it, but I said, how did it go? And the mayor of a major city said, like, he led with ostriches and didn't really resonate. And I was like, what about the heritage, the Cowichan? And of course that matters. People are very concerned about the Cowichan decision and private property, but he wasn't, and then I heard that again from other mayors, is that it didn't, he was kind of off because they were so focused on their topics. You know, they were focused on the heritage, their act, they were focused on public safety and bail reform, mandatory care. And then his speech was kind of, didn't really meet the moment for that, is what I heard. Second thing about the ostrich farm, and this is hot off the press, and you guys, it's the first place that I'm saying it publicly, and I haven't had it confirmed, although I did hear it from a few sources, is that they might be related to, you know, they're like the sovereigntist sort of movement, these Waco kind of connections, which there is one also in Clearwater.
Well, there's definitely the ostriches. I can't believe this issue. We're talking about it, but it's definitely, well, it's Robert Kennedy's been speaking about it. It's attracted these American interests, and it's kind of like a COVID kind of anti-vaccine kind of vibe to it. But I just, to me, like as soon as I'm just speaking as a non-NDP guy that just wants good government in British Columbia, it just made me think the Conservatives are out there in the fringes talking about things that people who care about affordability or the economy or healthcare, they're not connecting. You know, like they don't want to hear about ostriches. You know, they don't want to hear. I mean, at the Conservative fundraiser last week, they started off with a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk, and it's like it's a terrible thing that happened to Charlie Kirk. No one's. I better be careful. I might get Jimmy Kimmeled here. But it's like stick to your knitting. You know, like this BC politics. There are big issues at play here. There's a lot of people with concerns about the NDP's management of the issues. Do we have to fight a culture war on everything? You know, that's the way I was feeling about it.
Yeah, it feels to me like there's parallel universes here where there's deep concern in a part of the population about the ostrich thing for a whole set of reasons, which I'm not clear on, but it's important to them, and a whole bunch for which other issues are critical, maybe Gaza, for example. And then there's that whole territory in between where municipal politics usually works, which is where the overwhelming majority of the mayors were. And it was telling to me, Fran, you've made this point that Starko was no longer a member of the caucus, although she has been the leading critic of the government on all the critical issues for mayors, public safety, voluntary care, safe supply, maybe not the housing one, but certainly front and center on the key ones on the other side.
Yeah, it's interesting though, you know, and you can say a lot of things, and I know a lot of people found her a challenging personality because she's ambitious and she's you know, determined and forthright, and but she listens. Like she does listen, and she has an incredible like Rolodex of sources because people tell her stuff, and she honors it and she follows through on it. So yeah, she was in touch, and I don't
there
think
she was sitting in the front row of the Rustad speech, kind of looking up and glaring at him. So
that was a different reason for that, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, we haven't heard the last of Eleanor Sturko, so
I'm not sure that.
I wonder about that though. Like, where does she go from here? I mean, you know, she's not got a great track record of being a team player. You know, she's talented for all the reasons Fran says, but my first instinct was to say what you would say, Mike. She's, you know, we haven't heard the last, but what now?
Well, I think what now is that there's 3 years, maybe less, in this term of office, and she's going to continue to get media as an independent. So we haven't heard the last of her until the next election, right?
Right.
And then, is there anywhere to go after that? And who knows? Federal politics find a home provincially, or go into do something outside of party politics. I don't know, but she certainly has a megaphone if she wants to use it, 'cause she's good at it. But is
Yeah,
she good? Is she good at being a team player? I don't know.
she's an incredible communicator, actually.
Mm.
In this, especially in our time right now.
Hmm.
And she's very passionate. She's ambitious, of course, but
Mhm.
she's very passionate about all the issues that there's no, she's not being insincere about anything. Some people accuse her of that, but I don't believe that to be true. I think she really cares about what she's doing.
Why are BC public sector workers on strike? It's simple. We can't afford to stay in our jobs without fair wages. I'm a wildfire fighter. I risk my life to keep others safe, but I make just $28 an hour. Half of us are thinking about leaving already, and now government wants us to accept wages below inflation. I can't afford to fall behind.
Tell government to come back to the table with a fair deal before we lose the people who keep BC running. Visit frontlinesfirst.ca. A message from the BC General Employees Union.
One of the issues that Rustad tackled in the speech, which I think was where the meat of his speech was the Cowichan decision, and I think that's the kind of content people want to hear and expect to hear from Rustad, John Rustad. And I thought his comments on the Cowichan decision were reasonable from his perspective on things. There are a lot of concerns about it. He spoke from a position of knowledge, being a former minister. He's basically saying he's got concerns. He doesn't think shared title, Indigenous title overlaid with private fee simple title is going to work, and he had a prescription for that, which is that the federal government should refer it to the Supreme Court of Canada, and that's probably was the centerpiece of his speech. And I just couldn't get past the ostriches, um, but I mean that was his message. But he wasn't. I didn't hear. I don't think I heard anything on the deficit,
Mm.
and I didn't hear a lot about the economy. So, but the issue of the week really was the Cowichan and the Heritage Conservation Act. So, fair enough if he wanted to tackle that during his speech, and he did make a commitment to basically eliminate Metro Vancouver Regional District and just reduce it to basically a drainage and sewer district. And fair enough. I mean, that's a solid, that's an idea. That's a policy prescription. That's pointing out something that he thinks is wrong, and there's a lot of controversy around. So, hey, you're at a municipal convention, good place to roll that out. I don't think it really landed. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of Metro Vancouver directors in the room where we're like, oh, but, but, uh, but I mean, his audience is out there, and if that was what the hit he was trying to get, I don't think he got a big bounce of it outside of the room, but I can see why he was trying to, though, anyways.
Well, Pierre Poilievre has now elevated the Cowichan issue to the national stage and said it poses a threat to private property nationally. So I don't know whether that's helpful or not to the BC conservative cause. I think Poilievre's wrong. But I think what's been missing on the Cowichan case is a solid articulation of why the decision was correct. And we haven't really heard that. We didn't hear that at all from the premier. But there's certainly a lot of respected Indigenous law experts and others who say everybody should take a Valium, and that this is just built on Canadian jurisprudence and building out a lot of things that have already been going on. And we do have a lot of these overlapping things. It may seem confusing at first blush, but what we heard again last week, which I hadn't heard for a long time, was the view that there should be extinguishment of Aboriginal rights and title, and that there should be none, basically, where there's private property. And I don't think that flies for a whole set of reasons. We could do a different show on it. But one thing that's been missing from the field, I think, and wasn't at the UBCM, unless you saw it, Fran, and I missed it, which would be possible for sure, is somebody saying, hey, the Cowichan decision is not something to be terrified of. There may be things to work out and questions that need answering, but it's not the end of the world.
I think the only person that might have said that was Rosenberg, who represented Cowichan. Yeah, sorry.
Well, that was an interesting session at the convention. David Rosenberg, counsel for the Cowichan Nation, and Robin Younger were two of the lawyers there. Robin speaking from the kind of the other point of view on it, and
And
know,
as a former deputy minister
former
on
deputy minister.
treaty
So we
negotiation.
can't,
So
sorry,
that's
go ahead,
on,
Mike.
and just for our listeners who are really interested in this content, on the Union of BC Municipality website, that video is available to see what the lawyers themselves are saying about it. And when I was listening to Rosenberg speak, I was amidst some mayors and councillors in the back, leaning against the back wall listening, and they were like, you could hear a pin drop actually when they were speaking, and um, people were not aware of some of the base facts, and who would be, right? Like it's super complicated, but when you start hearing the context and things, it's like, oh, okay, and Robin had some good points too. Like it's there's a lot of implications, there's a lot of consequences that nobody knows how it's going to play out yet. But that's what the UBCM's good at, is one of the things it's good at is convening these types of discussions with a whole bunch of opinion leaders and policymakers in the room, and everyone kind of learning together.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't just rush by the issue of ambitious women who are moving in new directions without talking about Emily Lowen, who came and gave her speech as leader of the Green Party 22 hours after she got the job, as I recall. Did you have a chance to look at her presentation?
Me? Yeah, no, I didn't. I wasn't there in the hall for it, but I certainly read about it. And I was loosely following her campaign. I kind of was surprised that in the end they didn't find some way, as the other parties have, to knock her out before she became leader, because that seems to be the way it goes with political parties. So somehow my curiosity is, how are you leader when you're not an MLA? And because that seems to me, in talking
I have
with,
some experience with that.
yeah, okay, but yeah, I guess she's going to run, but it's not, her options are pretty limited.
Pierre
What
Paul
riding
has
she
some
can-
experience in that too.
Yeah, but
well,
he's for sure, he knew he was going to get back in. Where is she going to run? There's only 2 seats that were
well,
even
she might have to
close.
wait out to the next election. I mean, she doesn't really have much choice on that. So, I
Just
mean, she has no electoral history, so that makes it a little more unique. Whereas, when Christie found her seat and got in, even though she was elected leader without a seat, but she had a history. She had
exactly.
a track record. But this is the Greens we're talking about, so but
So okay,
her speech was you know devoid of any realistic constructive policy. Is full of, from her perspective,
Are you
good
going to defend the
intentions.
oligarchs here, Mike?
Well, certainly, I'm not sure if I am part of the oligarchy. If I am, her speech was directed at me. Maybe I'm the patriarchy. I don't know what I am, but I'm archy something. But it was, if I'm Jeremy Valeriot and Rob Botterill, I'm thinking like, what are we going to do here? But most meaningfully, aside from the oligarchy part of the speech, which was about 99% of it, she did say she wanted to aggressively renegotiate or accelerate the renegotiation, maybe that's what she said, of the Green NDP Pact. And I'm thinking like, if I'm David Eby, I'm like, because that is, if they feel they can win an election in 2026, let's assume it even waits that long. If they think they've got a window and the Conservatives are falling apart, the Greens will play into their hands. And Emily Lowen is going to aggressively fight the natural resource agenda that EB's laying out. And if EB calls an election on it, the support for the Greens will not be there. And they're going to have a big problem. Now, she might be very good at getting candidates in every riding and getting young people mobilized around the province and filling out the activist base. But there is that group of Green voters who've been parking with the Greens, who might otherwise have been NDP voters. And I think, and there's a lot of older white middle class voters who vote Green, and I think they're not up for this. Is my gut feeling
Yeah, I
on it.
think they might sit on their hands. It depends on how she presents it, but there's only a handful, like under 5 ridings where she would even be viable. And as you say, as someone so new, it'll be difficult for a lot of those older middle class voters to buy into her project like they can to an Elizabeth May or they did for Adrian Carr.
Yeah.
But even Adrian Carr was only successful municipally. Adrian Carr's candidate, by the way, was Jonathan Kerr, who was
Yeah.
she backed him, and he did, I thought, surprisingly poorly. He wasn't skunked or anything. He had a respectable showing, but he was soundly beaten by Emily Lowen for sure.
Well, as you pointed out the other day, Jeff, like, the Greens, I mean, I would still say the numbers aren't super high in terms of, anyone in the province could have got a membership and voted in this thing. But still, she got about 3,300 votes and Kerr got about 1,900 votes. And that's a lot more than voted in the Conservative Leadership Review, So it's not easy getting people to join a political party at the best of times. So she's got a list. She's working a list, and it's the climate justice, social justice, all that kind of stuff. And they're red hot on those issues. It's just that their ceiling is not very high.
Well, I think you studied the numbers way more than I do, Mike, but if there was a rise in the Green vote to say 14% from 9 to 11 that it's been typically in certain key ridings, that could be a very big headache for the NDP. And the NDP didn't never needed an agreement with the Greens. It was kind of one of those things that David Eby did after the election shock to bolster and stabilize his position. But it was a much softer deal, onerous in work terms, I think, but softer than the original CASA deal of 2017. So if it's torn up, it doesn't mean much in the near term for him. But if she's successful electorally, which is a big if, it could be problematic for the NDP in a number of places.
I don't
He
know
seems
that. Why? I don't know that Emily Lowen realizes that Jeremy Valeriot's riding is called West Van Sea to Sky Oligarchs. That's where they live, So
Well, we got some on this side of
he's going to be in a
Oregon.
tough position, that explaining to his constituents up in Whistler, but in West Vancouver. So
well, he got elected somehow.
he got elected.
The luxury vote. Yeah,
So-
I still wonder how she's gonna lead the party from outside. I mean, that seems to be one of the big headaches in talking with party leaders,
Yeah.
like when they're in the party, just trying to deal with the party politics. When they're in the legislature trying to deal with the party politics. So how are you going to deal with the party politics when your 2 MLAs and your leader is outside and it's so extreme? Although, our 2 MLAs are not that far off from what she says regularly.
Well, thanks to taxpayer funding of political parties, she'll probably be able to draw a salary from the Green Party, and she can travel around and organize while Mr. Valeriot and Mr. Botterill are tending to the legislature. She'll miss out on some media, but maybe it will suit her interest to just organize. That's probably, and here, I'm well aware that I'm some old dude who's, throwing some shade at a 25-year-old young woman who has taken over a political party, and that's no small accomplishment. I'll treat her as an equal and judge her on her merits of her speech, which I didn't think was very good. But I think she obviously has a lot of passion and gas in the tank to organize. So I think she's obviously going to be a very different type of leader for the Greens than they've had. And I don't think it's going to work out electorally, but I think she is going to be heard from in the next few years because I think she's going to mobilize an activist base that are going to show up in politics in a different way than what we've seen.
Just to pick up on your point there for a sec, though, Jeff, the Greens' recent agreement was almost vacuous by comparison to the original CASA. So and Eby has said that he wants to meet with her right away. She said that she wants to rip up the agreement. So I can only imagine if they do sign another agreement, just what that will look like.
Well, a lot of the people who supported her, I think, were the same kind of people, maybe not the identical ones, but who supported Angela Paterai, who until she was thrown out of the NDP race was opposing David Eby's bid for the Premier's chair for the leader of the NDP. And there is that current in BC politics. It's not always in the electoral level, but we'll see. Between her and Eleanor Sturko, there's two fascinating personalities to keep an eye on there. And in addition to Dallas Brody, who's got her own little party now. So many changes.
Lots going on. Well, so Fran, what do you see looking ahead to the legislative sitting that starts October 6th? I think it's a 5-week session or sitting, I should say. Do you have
Well,
anything in your crystal ball there?
I just wonder, wouldn't it be interesting, and this will never happen, but imagine if Eleanor Sturko and Jordan Keeley formed a party, and then we would have
Another official party.
I haven't heard that suggestion. Interesting, yeah.
like it came up, and Evie was asked whether he would consider dropping it, to make official party status is, you would
Bring it
know.
up.
Is it 2?
It's 2. It's 2.
It's 2.
Jeff lowered it.
No, that was
Thanks,
all me.
Jeff.
That was all me.
So all Eleanor Sturko has to do is align with Jordan Keeley, and they'll have their own party.
Yeah.
Then they'll
Who
have their
knows?
own questions. That not very often.
Well, we
but
got one BC. We could use 2 BC, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
there was some. Yeah. So that's my prediction.
What do you think the hot issue for the fall is going to be in question period?
Well, I think one sort of minor thing is going to come up with what Geoff mentioned is Larry Campbell. That'll again be an issue, minor. The Heritage Conservation Act for sure will be top of mind because I'm pretty sure that they won't do the consultation in a way that will satisfy anyone, probably including the First Nations, who have locked down 53 of 57 aspects, First Nations Leadership Council and the government, which is the crux of the issue for the municipal representatives. So that's going to be an issue. And even though he extended it, the question already is, well, what is there really going to be any effect or collaboration in that extension? Because if 53 aspects are already locked down, what opportunity is there for movement? Then the Cowichan decision, the opposition will be pushing hard on that and trying to force the government's hand. Probably the extinguishment issue will come up. They'll be asking them why won't they? Are they going to argue extinguishment if they do appeal? Excuse me. And then, of course, all the public safety and mandatory care. Nothing's going to come fast enough or furious enough. So that will be top of mind. And then there's all the little scandals that erupt along the way. In terms of, I don't know, in terms of legislation, this government, it tends to be kind of, they throw a lot of stuff out with not as much notice as we were previously used to. So I'm sure there'll be pieces coming out that we weren't expecting.
Well, the throne speech was pretty slim on specifics about what might happen. And as you say, 2 of the things that did happen, the bills intended to hurry up major development ran into huge difficulty. One is still there, I guess, in some form, but one was completely withdrawn, as I recall. Hard to keep track of all these things. But the spring session didn't really produce too much substantive in terms of legislation. And I can't think of what's been proposed for the fall.
It's usually pretty light in the fall.
Yeah.
But, unless they've got a little surprise for us. I mean, it's a short sitting, so there's not
It's not a ton of time.
there's not a ton of time, although the legislation will have to get done by the end of the sitting, or else it will get die in the order paper. I always found fall sittings a little dangerous too. I think
Is that why you canceled them?
Jeff? Maybe it's because the first year Christie was premier, we had a fall sitting, and it was frankly a disaster. So maybe that's why I'm a little bit tender on that issue. Although, UND Pearson,
Well, if we're going to promise to restore it,
so
and
virtuous.
I think the main beneficiaries of Horgan's decision to restore fall sittings, apart from the general democratic process, of course, was
Yeah.
the press gallery, which was on life support when there was only one session a year. But once there were two, I think it was a lot easier for some of the editors to justify keeping more correspondence in Victoria.
And how'd that
Oh.
work out?
Well,
Did-
they're all wonderful people.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't think there could be no session and Keith Baldry would still be there. So, period. They could get rid of the legislature; he'd still be there.
I think the economy too. Sorry, just and by
Yeah.
the way, yeah. Apparently, the press gallery has substantially thinned out since the good old days. So
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
you would know about that more.
Okay, well, we'll starting next week, we'll be paying closer attention to what's happening in the legislature, and see how they perform. You know, one big issue that just dropped today before we head off to the minibar, I think, just bears raising here, which is the Alberta government
yeah.
today released their plan on pursuing an oil pipeline. And at this point, it's a plan to have a plan, I think, where they're involving Enbridge, Trans Mountain, and which is
TC Energy.
owned by the federal government, and South Bow, which is part of the old TC Energy, or
Right.
split off from TC Energy, and they're going to draw on the technical expertise of those companies to plan a route and I guess a template for the oil pipeline. But
But also
that
the
was likely
Alberta
not.
Machine Learning Institute, which I thought,
Yes,
Oh,
maybe they're
so,
putting this whole thing to AI or something.
I guess, yeah.
so
but,
that was in. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's welcome news for the BC government today. That's for sure.
No, and David Eby he was at a press conference today on another matter, and he called it a totally unsupported proposal. He called it basically he is not in favor of it. He said BC has all these shovel-ready projects ready to go, and we should be focusing on that. And by sort of pulling the attention to these make-believe projects is kind of his connotation. We're taking them away. We're taking attention away from actual projects that would move BC forward, which was interesting because, and his thing is there's no proponent, so the Alberta government's going to form a crown corporation and put this forward. So he's saying there's no proponent, there's no project. But what was interesting to me is that Adrian Dix last week said of the North Coast transmission line that they're not going to rely on the vagaries of private interests. So the government is going to fund the transmission line and get the gas going to draw in investors. And so I'm like, isn't that kind of what Alberta's doing? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think the Northwest Transmission one is to also support critical minerals in the whole northwest part of the province. So it would allocate a lot of Site C power and renewable power, which they put out a call for, to that. And we've had to have public direction of those kinds of investments ever since WAC Bennett. What I think is new in Alberta is that even though the private sector controls the oil sands, there's no public corporation there. They're not prepared to go forward, but the Premier of Alberta appears determined to go forward somehow or other on a route not yet determined for reasons that are not clear, except that she wants to double bitumen production.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say this is Danielle Smith's crazy idea and it comes out of thin air. I think she's got a full backing of at least half of the province. Her political base is strongly behind her on this.
Sure, but I think there's ways that they could expand oil sands, even though I'm not in favor of it personally.
Yeah.
Using the unused capacity in the current pipeline, which just began production, they're going to deepen the water under the Second Narrows Bridge, for heaven's sake. I mean, there's a lot to do yet.
But there is a national unity problem in Alberta, and it's directly connected to oil sands access to market, and they feel blocked by British Columbia. And maybe they'll go the other way to Churchill and
But one
save
of the
BC the
biggest
headache.
investors in
But,
the oil sands is Exxon through Imperial Oil, and they're just laying off 1,000 Canadians yesterday.
yeah.
Part of the problem for Danielle Smith is that when she pushes hard on that kind of development, she's supporting a lot of important American firms, and whose political leadership right now is making life miserable for us. So,
But she's trying to get her product to markets other than America. So
Well, we have lots of other
it's interesting. Yeah,
other
I mean,
businesses that are creating jobs in BC that are American owned. So I mean, where do we draw the line?
yeah,
it's
it's a
it's an
debate we got to
interesting
have. We
it's an
talked about
interesting issue that won't go away. I mean, it dominated the press conference today for Eby, and he's like clearly exasperated with with being asked about the
Well, it's
pipeline.
going to be controversial for
Yeah,
sure.
just
Well, and
keeps.
also today, the news that tariffs on softwood lumber are going to 45%. I mean, I don't know how anybody's going to function in the BC forest sector under those kinds of pressures.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, you got to wrap it up.
Well, I was
they're
gonna
saying up in North Island, because there was a whole group of mayors that came together again through UBC coastal forestry calling for help, and they're saying that because of regulatory issues, because of the 30 by 30 preserve 30% of land forever by 2030, and because of the slow permitting process, that there's forestry companies that are having to buy logs from the US to ship them out of Canada. So I don't know, I'm no expert there, but this the increase in tariffs is really hitting a lot of small communities really hard, and there's got to be something. It's got to be some way to help them.
Yeah. Well, I think in a future episode we'll have to drill down to the forestry issues a bit more because that definitely was top of mind for a lot of mayors that you were talking to. I was talking to last week. We'll have to hear from Mayor James Fernie from Port McNeill because he's actually pretty funny. So it'd be good to have him see if he's as funny as Charlie Demers. But we'll get him on that show.
Tall order.
Tall order. Okay, well, Fran, you know that we have a mini bar here at Hotel Pacifico. So let's check it out. Geoff, do you want to start off
Well, I'm
this
going to
week?
raise a glass to my old boss, Larry Campbell, who's taken on a job that very few people would put up their hands for. I read the terms of reference. There's quite a lot of bureaucraties there, but I think Larry distilled it down to trying to get people who need housing into housing, making sure that supply of housing reaches the people in most critical need. So he's got a lot of work ahead of him, a 6-month deadline, but good for him for taking it on. It's one of the most intractable problems in BC from every angle, and I wish him all the best.
Okay. There's life after being senator.
Apparently.
Fran, do you have one top of mind? You can raise a glass or take a shot.
I will raise a glass, although I had a shot prepared just in case because I didn't know which way you were going to go on this.
Well, please go.
Yeah.
You can
your
take a
call.
shot. By all
No, I
means,
have
take a
to-
shot.
I have to work after, but I'll show you my boat shot. I thought just because in Victoria.
See, Fran, you did this before. You actually come prepared to the mini bar. You actually bring booze
Well,
to the mini bar.
I was trying to just do a plug for my favorite
Empress
gin.
Gin.
Yeah.
Empress
Oh,
Gin,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Love Empress Gin.
Yeah, kind of goes good with everything. I would say I'm going to do a toast though too with to the mayors because I thought they're really showing some leadership. They're bearing huge burdens these days. They've got all these issues happening that they're not even responsible for, but they're getting waylaid in the grocery store. They're getting inundated about, and instead of complaining, they are coming up with trying to come up with plans on how to solve the issue and how to work with the province and the federal government. So my toast is to the mayors.
Cheers.
Right. Empress Gin goes well with everything. There you go. You heard it here first.
I guess it leads to purple prose, though, doesn't it?
Does it go well with your frosted flakes in the morning? And what was that old scandal, Geoff? Scotch on the cornflakes?
Yeah,
And
that's
now
right.
It's,
Oh.
now it's Empress Gin on the frosted flakes. Okay. For me, I'll raise a glass to a couple people who have passed away and that bears mentioning today. One is Chief Bill Williams from Squamish Nation. Geoff, you may have met him over the years, maybe.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I knew Bill from the 90s, late 80s, 90s, when he was a very active supporter of the BC Liberals and what they then had called the BC Liberal Aboriginal Commission. And he was one of the people who got that going and represented Indigenous point of view within the Liberal Party that really hadn't been there. And there were certainly some leaders over the years who were torchbearers for that, like Len Marchand. But as an organized group, this was a new thing, and Bill was a critical part of it in British Columbia. And then he went on for decades to be a leader in the Squamish Nation, and was heard from quite regularly. So raise a glass to Bill and Chief Bill. And also, just in the last day, there's news that Nigel Wright, who's a former chief of staff to Stephen Harper, passed away. And I think this caught a lot of people in his network by surprise. And I had some dealings with him when I was chief of staff. Very much a gentleman, very honorable person to deal with. And certainly there were some critical issues we were dealing with in BC at the time. And we could have a very straightforward, honest discussion with Nigel. But, you know, I know a lot of people who were very close to him and who really looked up to him and are hurting today. So I'm thinking about all those people in especially the conservative network that had a chance to work with Nigel over the years, and the impact he made in politics was significant. So in the political fraternity, you have those relationships. We all do in all parties. And I definitely feel that coming from the conservative side today. So thank you, Fran, for coming in and chewing
Yes,
over
thanks,
the
Fran.
UBCM and what's coming up in the legislative sitting. And I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, Fortis BC, and the BCGEU. See you next week. BC, you can never leave.